Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to lecture 18. As I promised you earlier, I did tell you that we shall be going into the theories of truth. So we are still examining truth, which is the central problem of philosophy. Actually, right from lecture 16, lecture 17, and lecture 18, we are discussing issues of truth. So in this lecture, ladies and gentlemen, we shall be able to cover, I'll certainly give you a preliminary map of the classical theories of truth. Then I'll take you to the correspondence theory. I'll take you to the coherence theory. I'll take you to the verificationist theory. I'll take you to the pragmatism theory and the identity theory. But in this lecture, I will begin by the preliminary map and then thereafter go into the other aspects, ladies and gentlemen. So in this case, since we are dealing with theories, I want to tell you that before examining the various classical philosophical conceptions of truth, we need to try to characterize the main features of our naive, commonsensical conceptions of truth. We have a predicate, true, right? Predicate, true, in all languages. If you go in Arabic, you'll find equivalents. In French, they'll be talking about vrai. In Luganda, you also find another word being used, amazima, which we apply. All these are used to describe the issue of truth. So now, but this word true, which appears in all languages, can be applied to all sorts of items. It can be applied to thoughts. It can be applied to beliefs. It can be applied to judgments, ladies and gentlemen. It can be applied to ideas. It can be applied to conceptions. It can be applied to views. The word true can be applied to theories. It can be applied to assertions, right? And of course, all of those things which seem to refer to the contents of our thoughts, which are abstract or probably at least non-concrete entities in this case. So we also apply the same concept or the same word or predicate true to pictures, to artifacts, to pieces of currency, even to living animals. Now, for instance, we say that this is a true drawing by a comrade, right? So it means that comrade has actually drawn this. But it's a true drawing by comrade. This is a true copy of a document. This is a true copy of the transcript. This is a true copy of the certificate. You can also say this is a true 5,000 Uganda shilling banknote. Or you can say this is a true piece of artillery. Or this is a true English setter. So you can use the word true to anything, right, as we have seen before, to conceptions, to views, to ideas, to beliefs, to judgments, to artifacts, to pictures, to pieces of currency, everywhere. Now, in such cases, the meaning of true seems to be the same as authentic, right, or what we call real, or faithful, or exact, or conforming to a model or a type. Now, sometimes, too, we employ the word true to characterize other sorts of properties, such as character traits. For instance, when we talk of a true friend, right, we are talking about a character, right? We mean that the person is loyal. We mean that the person is trustworthy. All these meanings, ladies and gentlemen, they seem to derive from two basic ones, as you can see. And that is true as a property of an item that makes it genuine. So when you say true, so true becomes then property of an item that makes it genuine. So when you talk about this is true, tested, right? Or this is true water, true mineral water, right? It means that it has been tested and proven beyond reasonable doubt that it is mineral water, right? Otherwise, you may end up taking something that is not really mineral water in that perspective. So true as a property of an item that makes it genuine, natural, or real, as opposed to contrived, artificial, or fictional, and certainly true, because you can refer true as a relation between some item to which the predicate is attributed and some other item which makes true the first item. Now, the former is what one calls in the current philosophical vocabulary the truth bearer, right? So you have the truth bearer and the latter, what we call the truth maker. As we have just remarked, the truth bearer are usually considered to be the contents of information transmitted by various concrete entities. And of course, these could be mental, so the actual ideas, or these could be physical in terms of sentences, in terms of drawings on a piece of paper, or patterns of symbols, or probably sounds which are emitted. And of course, that is very important because you are talking about truth bearers, right? So truth bearers, as I've said, they are considered to be content of information. Truth bearers, they contain that information. And this information is transmitted by various concrete entities which I've already mentioned, which could be mental, physical, or otherwise, rather than the concrete entities themselves, ladies and gentlemen. Now, as you can see, it is really uncontroversial that we often apply the predicate true to concrete physical items, such as sentences, or probably sequence or sequences of sounds or symbols. So we rarely use the word true when it comes to sounds. But it seems clear that we attribute it to the content of the sentences rather than to the physical entities of which they are made of. And of course, once in a while, you can say that a sentence, a particular sentence is true. But we do not say that this sequence of sound is true. So even in the music, right, although you say, well, it sounds nice, I like the music, but you cannot say that the sequence of sounds, even when I talk, you cannot say that the sequence of the tone, right, or the voice, or what you hear is true, right? So we rarely apply the word true to the sequence of sounds. Similarly, when we say such things as, I wish my dreams came true, we refer to the content of our dreams, right? But we are not saying that the dreams are true. No, I wish my dreams came true. We refer to the content of our dream, especially when you dream good things. You probably dream when you are very rich, right? So you say, I wish the contents of my dream came true. So you refer to the content of the dreams. But you don't refer to the psychological or physical events that appear in our brains, ladies and gentlemen. So finally, our ordinary notion of truth is such that when we say that a certain utterances or a certain utterance or belief is true, we intend to say that it has a certain further characteristic than the mere fact that we have the belief or that the utterance has been performed. So we use it to refer to an objective property that our beliefs, our statements have independent of us. So when we talk about true, right, ladies and gentlemen, we use that word true to refer to an objective property, right? The property, the objective part. Remember, there's the objective and subjective, right? but the objective part that our beliefs about something, our statements about something, right, are probably true. Now, the fact that we call something true or false seems to mark a real distinction between the things that have these properties and the things that don't have. So at the end of the day, we can actually look at this item and say, this has this, and then you compare it with another item, right? Why, right, maybe this one here, and then you say what is contained here is not really what is contained here. So you can actually use that comparison between what is considered to be true with what is considered not to be true in that case. So when someone else wants to agree, that person says it is true, meaning that he or she endorses the previous assertion. So in a conversation, you might start talking, and somebody tells you a story that, you know, John went to the lake and he started swimming, or he swam yesterday, or probably he got 2 million Uganda shillings, right, that kind of thing. So when you talk to somebody and somebody wants to agree with you, that person might say, it is true, right? Now, when he says it is true, it means that he or she endorses the assertions that you are making. Now, the two statements, let me just give you another example of two other statements. The volcano has erupted, right? That's a statement, right? It is true that the volcano has erupted, but do not exactly mean the same thing, right? For the latter contains the mark of approval. The volcano has erupted is a sentence. You make another statement, right, or a sentence. It is true that the volcano has erupted, right? The volcano has erupted, and it is true that the volcano has erupted. These are two sentences, right, which do not exactly mean the same thing. For the latter contains the mark of approval. That's why you say, it is true, right? Then the other one, then it is not really, the mark of approval is not there, right? So you need to understand these things very well so that at the end of the day, you can actually tell what is true and what is not true. So in this sense, the words is true do not designate a further characteristic from the fact that the sequence has this content. But the predicate true is true does not seem to be at par with such properties as it is square, or it is 3 kilograms, or it is noon, or it is afternoon, or something like that. So we need to be very careful what we are talking about. So when we say that a thought is true, ladies and gentlemen, a thought is true. When we say it is true, we do not seem to be attributing it to a genuine property. This conflicts with the previous intuition that truth is an objective property of our thoughts. So that's why we're examining the issue of truth. So far, this is not very philosophically controversial, as you can see, although there is room to elaborate philosophical ideas from these simple observations, ladies and gentlemen. So philosophy starts when one remarks that it is not obvious that these features of our predicate, true, are features of a single unified concept. If you recall, I think it was around lecture 1, lecture 2, where we talked about concepts and conceptual systems. And in lecture 13, 14, 15, we went into modeling, abstraction of reality using idealization, de-idealization, and that debate, abstractions, caricatures. I hope you still remember all those things that we went through, ladies and gentlemen. So there is some bit of modeling in that particular aspect, but we use concepts because the concepts represent events, right? And our models must be able to capture reality out there. If you undertake a research and at the end of the day you test out and you go back to the field and you discover that what you thought is correct was based on wrong assumptions, and therefore these things do not exist, then certainly your results may not really mean a lot, and you cannot even come up with the implications for theory, implications for methodology, and certainly practical implications or policy implications in that perspective. So that's why I say it is not evident that the bearers of truth are, and that is our first notion, which is very important, and hopefully we'll be able to also end this lecture very soon. Now, of course, you can see here that a long philosophical tradition going back to the Stoics, I hope you know them, and which are, these are the traditions, right, that somehow help us understand the issues of truth, which are represented in the works of Frigg and Carnap. I gave you Carnap's construction, I hope you still remember that. There are claims that the truth bearers are propositions. The truth bearers are abstract entities expressed by linguistic sentences. And of course, there's another tradition which goes back to Descartes and classical empiricism that claims that the truth bearers are ideas, the truth bearers are beliefs, the truth bearers are mental representations. And of course, that's what it is. But they also believe that they carry certain content, but that tends to be mental or psychological in nature. So whereas the other people believe in true objects, right, the truth bearers being propositions, right, and that is really from Carnap's and Frigg. Truth bearers are propositions, and you now know what a proposition is, right? You have an element of fact in it. So fact is important. You are dealing with the facts. So if you don't have facts, you don't really carry. Like now when I tell you, this is water inside. If you have facts that there is water inside here, then that proposition can be believed to constitute knowledge, because knowledge is justified true beliefs, as you can see. So there's a justification element, there's a belief in it, and there's a truth in it, in what we're saying. So when you go back to Carnap's construction of the world and Frigg's and the rest of the others, then there are claims that truth bearers are propositions, right? And of course, although they are propositions, they are abstract entities as well, expressed by linguistic sentences. However, when you go to Descartes and classical empiricism, they only say that truth bearers are ideas. So they go into concepts, right? So the truth bearers can be beliefs and mental representations. So they carry a certain content, but that content seems to be mental or psychological in nature. And of course, as you can see, some philosophers from Occam and Hobbes to Quine have also claimed that the bearers of truth are sentences or physical symbols, or at least entities locatable in space and time, like utterances. So when you talk about utterances, again, you can talk about the element of truth. So, but you need also to note that there are also a disagreement among philosophers about these particular aspects. So there is a disagreement about what kind of property truth is, right? So let us leave aside for the moment one view that truth might not be a genuine property, and let us assume that it is a real characteristic. So some philosophers, as you may have heard, ladies and gentlemen, hold that truth is an intrinsic or monadic property of truth bearers. So there's that element of intrinsic, right, value, intrinsic property, monadic property of truth bearers. And of course, in that perspective, they are talking about one, that they have absolutely, and in virtue of nothing else, are not in relation to other things, right? So you can't relate to things like being happy, which is a monadic property, but they believe that, you see, there is this intrinsic element or monadic property of the truth bearers. But the most common view, ladies and gentlemen, is that truth is a relational property that holds between truth bearers and other entities. And the most classical conception is that truth is a relational, and maybe you can look at it in terms of relation of truth is the relation of correspondence. Truth is a relation of adequacy, or truth is a relation of fit, or truth is perhaps identity between the true items and something else, the truth makers in this case. So there's that conception of truth in terms of correspondence, and that's why we get the correspondence truth as a theory of truth, ladies and gentlemen. So among such conceptions, there is a disagreement about the nature of the truth makers among philosophers. Some philosophers claim that they are entities of a different kind from truth bearers, or facts, or states of affairs. Now, others do not make sense, and they don't make such distinctions, ladies and gentlemen. And some people are happy to say that truth is correspondence with the reality. So whatever you receive must correspond to the reality out there. And if it corresponds with the reality, then that is a correspondence truth. And we shall go into that theory, ladies and gentlemen. And possibly that will bring our debate of truth to the end, because we do not really intend to go very deep into this. But the most important thing for us to note here is that truth, right, must be able to cover reality out there. And that is what most philosophers seem to agree, right? The most classical conception of truth being in terms of relation to correspondence, right? And that's what we have, ladies and gentlemen. So it covers reality out there. Right, but there are also other views, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm going to really skip those views in the interest of time. And those are issues that we shall discuss later on. But I want to take you to one important perspective that you should not really forget, ladies and gentlemen, because for us to be able to go into the theories of truth, we need to understand where these ideas come from. So I want to show you a diagram here. I'm sure you can see that diagram on the screen, right? This is what we shall call our figure, possibly 1. Now, when you look at this figure, ladies and gentlemen, you will discover that truth, right, is characterized by a number of things, and these are the theories that explain truth, right? So as you can see, in the middle here, in the green color, I'm sure you can see the green color, we talk about the truth of a truth bearer. Now, the truth of a truth bearer is constituted by a number of things, which you see this other side in red, right? And in red you have propositions, right? You have ideas, you have beliefs, you have sentences, you have utterances, and you have statements. So these are the things that constitute the truth of a truth bearer. So you can look at them in terms of propositions, and we have already discussed propositions, and you know what they are, and then ideas, right? So the truth of a truth bearer is, right? Now you can see this division on the screen where you have 1 and 2, right? Right. Now, 1, that's where we look at the truth of a truth bearer, which is a genuine property. Now, when we say it is a genuine property, now we go into what we call substantive theories. And those are the ones we are going to discuss in our next lecture. Now, on this other, if you look at my right-hand side, you have a 2. 1, remember I'm talking about the truth of a truth bearer, right? That is certainly genuine property, right? If it is a genuine property, you are talking about substantive theories. But you can also talk about the truth of a genuine bearer that is not a genuine property. Therefore, that takes us into what we call minimalist theories. And we shall discuss these theories. Now, if we go back to our number one, where truth is a genuine property, where we have substantive theories, right? We have that element of an intrinsic property, which we have already discussed. Again, that's why you have this from number one, where you have an intrinsic property, right? And then number two, as what we call a relational property, right? And I'm sure you can see that. Now, of course, from a relational property in this perspective, ladies and gentlemen, remember I'm talking about the truth of the truth bearer, which is a relational property, right? You also have this. So it takes us to 1.3. So that truth, right, which goes into genuine property, right, but genuine property goes into relational property, it takes us to what we call, which is constituted by relations, right, to other truth bearers. And that's why we have coherence. So that coherence will take us into what we call coherence theories. And of course, it will take us to useful effect, and that is pragmatism. And pragmatism is an important field of philosophy that we are going to discuss under truth. Right, then of course, the other side, under 1.2, since you had this, we have already covered 1.3, you go to 1.5, which is constituted by relations, but to other sorts of entities. And you can see, right, within that 1.4, I'm sure you can see that on the screen here, right, we have what we call the truth makers, and that is in green. Now, under truth makers, again, we have that in brackets. Those are the items which are presented in red. You have facts, right, and then you have states of affairs, and then you have the world. So when you talk about truth, which is a relational property but constituted by relations, so these relations are in other sorts of entities, and these entities can be in terms of a truth maker, as you can see, fact, states, and this is what we call correspondence. So we shall be looking at correspondence, truth, ladies and gentlemen, or correspondence theories of truth. Now, below it, where you have the B, ladies and gentlemen, we talk about the same entity, so that takes us to what we call identity, ladies and gentlemen. So as you can see, this diagram represents the preliminary map, and this is the map we are going to follow, ladies and gentlemen, in discussing the theories of truth. So we look at the truth of a truth bearer in terms of propositions, in terms of beliefs, in terms of utterances, sentences, in terms of utterances and statements, and that is looked at as a genuine property under substantive theory, and not a genuine property under minimalist theories. Then we come under substantive theories. Again, we start examining relational property, where you have coherence theory, then constituted by relations to other sorts of entities, correspondence, and then to other aspects which are very useful, and we have pragmatism, and then the other aspects which gives us identity aspects, ladies and gentlemen. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, as I said, it's very important that we really understand these things very well. So we can only ask questions now. One can ask, what is the meaning of our ordinary word true? And in general, the answer will involve an account of the various central uses of this word in our language. And one again can ask, what is our concept of truth? And the answer again will involve an account of the role played by this concept within our overall conceptual scheme in relation to other concepts. And that's why I've given you this diagram, that I hope the diagram is still there and you can see those things. And then what are the criteria of truth? And the answer will involve an account of the means by which we recognize the same thing is true. And then, of course, you have other things like what is the truth? And the answer will provide a definition of truth. And these are issues that we intend to delve into and then discuss. And finally, there is also a sense of theory of truth. And those are the aspects we are going to discuss in our next lecture, ladies and gentlemen. So, ladies and gentlemen, right now I want to thank you for being very patient and attending this lecture 18. Join me again in our lecture 19, where we shall discuss this figure that I've just given you. I'm sure the figure is still on and you can still see it. Where we shall be looking at the classical theories of truth based on this diagram that you see. Then we have gone through a preliminary map, but we shall go through the correspondence theory. I'm sure you can see correspondence on this figure here, the coherence. Then we shall go into pragmatism, the identity theory, and the verifications theory. So thank you very much for attending this lecture. I can only say, ladies and gentlemen, stay well, stay safe. I wish you a nice time. Bye.